So you're in the screen, but on mute. Okay, we are live. Waiting for people to tune in. Okay, guys, whoever is coming in, just say hi in the chat so that I know people are pouring in. And let's get on with the session as soon as we've got enough audience. We've got 5 watching so far. Hi, Manish. Thanks for tuning in. Let's wait for a few more seconds for the people to tune in. By the way, I'm super excited for today's session because we all are going to hear for somebody who's supposed to be traveling to India on the very this date. So we were planning to organize Serverless Days, Ahmedabad. Okay, and I've got a request from somebody back in US, working on Amazon as a senior developer advocate, and he just, out of the blue, he messaged me, "Hey, Ankit," on LinkedIn, that Ankit, I would want to, want to participate in your event, and these are the different keynotes that I could do. And I was thinking, I've been watching his Twitch streams of lately. I've never connected to him on LinkedIn, but he approached me and he showed interest that, being the serverless community that we were building, he wanted to take participation and he wanted to basically lead our, event by giving the keynote at our event. Unfortunately, because of this COVID, we couldn't invite him, we couldn't host him, and we had to postpone our event. But fingers are still crossed. We are, planning to do this event in December. So I'm gonna make sure that we get Eric in person in December. Hopefully, everybody's travel ban gets lifted off by then. So yeah, so that's the story that I have with Eric. All the different speakers that I've been inviting, one way or other, I've got a chance to have a conversation with them or have an interaction with them over the time, and that's how I've approached them. That I've been building this community out of Ahmedabad, and I would really like you to come up and give your knowledge to the community, share your knowledge with the community so that everybody can get benefits out of it. Okay. Okay, so I see Sohesh, Archana, Nishit, Jigar. Welcome everybody. Okay. So, okay, let's do a quick questions. How many of you know what is AWS SAM? A quick poll. Just say yes or no in the chat so I'll know. I'm waiting for answers. Okay, Nishit knows, Sohesh knows, Jigar knows. Sohesh, of course, you'll know. You've been working on it. Okay, so Vivek, welcome to this session. So, guys, see, whatever, like a lot of you people might have attended, other AWS or Amazon sessions, right? So there are usually 3 categories: 100, 200, and 300. 100 means the introductory sessions. 200 means intermediate, and 300 means an expert level session. So part of this session, I've asked Eric to keep it to 100 level so that people who doesn't know AWS SAM can take an advantage of this session and start utilizing it. You know, Me basically at Database, we've been using AWS SAM for quite some time now. It's been 2 years since I've been working with SAM, and trust me, the overall framework and the overall support which is there, it's quite good. So if you're developing a serverless applications with Amazon, okay, AWS SAM is a good way to start your serverless journey. Okay, you will ask questions that why do we need to choose a framework? because standards, best practices. A lot of times, if we start working with a new framework, we don't know, right, how to, like, for example, we know how to get started, but we may not know what is the right practice, what is the best practice to achieve certain functionalities, right? And that's when, okay, I didn't know I did edit. Okay,
Oh,
sorry. I
no
was
worries. I dropped for a minute. Now I'm back.
Okay. So, so I've added Eric in the chat, Eric in the stream as well. Okay, so everybody, Eric Johnson here. So Eric is a senior developer advocate with Amazon. He basically talks anything and everything with serverless, and you'll find this personality across all the conferences and all the different tech events that you could think of, and you'll find him there, speaking with all the energy, all the powerhouse that he has. Okay, I've been fan of his work from the way you'll see that in next 1 hour. When he starts speaking and the energy that he brings to the floor, it's amazing. And I'm gonna hi Nilesh. So Eric, Nilesh also handles Serverless Ahmedabad alongside us. Jigar
All right.
so here. So all of these folks are from the community who's been helping us, to manage this community together. So yes, as I was saying, Eric is a powerhouse, and you all would be listening from the person who might have given a lot of inputs to AWS SAM itself. You can find him on Twitch. He has got good collection of serverless knowledge on Twitch itself. So, Eric, just let me know your Twitch stream ID. I'll put it up
Yep.
in
So
and I'll put it up in comments as well later on.
yep.
So,
So I actually do Twitch under the AWS channel, but you can find me at EDJ Geek on Twitch and Twitter.
okay, thanks a lot.
Yep.
So, without further ado, Eric, I'll hand over this to you, and I'm gonna sit back and take all the knowledge that I can get. Okay, and
All
I'm
right.
happy to host you here, and looking forward to this session.
I am too, and I'm excited to do this. Yeah, we had talked quite a bit about trying to come and do a session there, and I've never been to India, and I would love to come. I would love to talk technology with y'all. I would love to talk serverless and just get crazy with that, and it will happen. We're gonna make it happen. So. But with that, I'm gonna tell you a little bit about myself. Like I said, I've never been called a powerhouse before. I appreciate that. My wife would probably tell you different. She'd probably tell you no. He just rambles all the time, but that's okay. I have been with AWS for 2 years, although I've been doing serverless since serverless came out. I remember the day at reInvent when they announced it, and I just my head exploded, my eyes lit up, and I said, "Why would you do it any differently?" Very honestly. So I've been a fan of that. So I know we don't have a ton of time, so we're going to jump in and get started here. What we're going to do, just quick agenda, is I'm going to go through what SAM is. I'm going to kind of explain to you what it is, and then we're going to talk about the SAM CLI and how that works. So and then for any questions, I know that we'll be moderating that, and I'll answer those towards the end. And if we don't get your question answered, you can see my Twitter handle here, EDJ Geek. Reach out to me. I do my best to answer them. I do my best to or connect you with the right people. So all right, so let's get started. So a lot of people say, what is SAM? Is it a person? If you follow anything about AWS, you'll see sometimes it's a squirrel. You'll see that in a minute. But SAM, here, let me get my presentation working here. There we go. That's a little bit more about me, and we'll just move on. I just talked about myself a little bit. SAM. So what SAM stands for is the Serverless Application Model. Okay, and you can see Sam the squirrel there. That's our mascot. And what that is it comes in two parts, right? The first thing we have is the SAM templates or SAM transform. Now, if you're familiar with AWS at all, we have our infrastructure as code in what's called CloudFormation. And SAM is built on top of CloudFormation. So if you've ever used CloudFormation to launch instances or build your VPC or bring really anything, you can do the same in SAM. But SAM is specific to serverless as well. So it has some serverless resources. The second half of this is the SAM CLI or command line interface. And this allows you to, provide tooling for local development, debugging, build, packaging, and so on. And I'm going to actually demonstrate that a little bit later. So we're actually going to talk a little bit more about the templates here, and then I'll be live demoing the CLI. All right, so let's talk about SAM templates for a minute, kind of see what this means. Now, you noticed here, I cut the squirrel in half. At work, you're like, oh, you cut the squirrel in half. So we put him back together. There's no problem there. All right, so we jump in here. Like I said, AWS SAM templates are built on top of CloudFormation, and you can use the CloudFormation, syntax here. So you can use things like parameters, mappings, outputs, etc. And if you're not familiar with CloudFormation, that's okay. I'll try to explain it as much, but we've got some. I'll give you some links that you can go to that help you get more with SAM, and in turn learn CloudFormation. So. All right, you can use YAML or JSON. I'm going to be real honest. I'm a YAML fan, so that's but JSON works fine, whichever. Usually in a room, I'll have people raise their hands, and it always starts a great debate between YAML or JSON. Okay, so here's what it looks like to kind of get an idea. So if I wanted to create a Lambda function with these 20 lines of code, I'm doing quite a bit. Okay, the first thing I'm doing is you can see on line 4. Okay, I'm creating a function. All right, so I have my declarations line 1 through 3. On line 4, I have the get products function. This is the logical name for my function that I'm using. And in here, I'm declaring what language I'm going to use, Node.js 12. The policies, which are the actual, these are the granular policies that we can use that the Lambda invokes under. So when we do this, it says when this Lambda invokes, it has this role or policies applied to it. And then you have the event that triggers the Lambda. And if you're new to serverless itself, I'm gonna define serverless in a very scientific way. Okay, you ready for this? Basically, serverless is there's no computers, obviously, but there are somewhere, but you don't have to manage them. But the idea of serverless is something happens, a Lambda reacts to it, or it invokes a Lambda function, and the function does something. That's very scientific. I get it. So I'll say it again. Something happens, we react and do something. That's the idea of this event-driven technology. And serverless is event-driven. Instead of having to pull things or look at things, we can just have the Lambda function available, and it's triggered by something else, by API gateway in an API call, something being dropped in a bucket, so on and so forth. So lots of things, and we'll talk about that in a minute. All right, so with these 20 lines of code, I'm able to create an actual infrastructure. These 20 lines of code will create an Amazon API gateway, a Lambda function, a DynamoDB table, so that's my database, and then the permissions wrapped around it. Very quick, very powerful. All right, so there's 7 serverless-specific resource types. This means these 7 things that work with SAM that are specifically serverless. And you can see them here, and we'll go through them. The first is the AWS Serverless function. This is kind of the workhorse of serverless, right? Lambda functions that's the first thing that came out, and this is where a lot of your business logic is going to happen. Okay, and we already saw what a template looks like there. But a couple things I want to point out. With serverless, you have a couple of build options, all right? And we're going to look at that in the CLI in a minute. But if you see down here, line 14 and 15, I've added a new tag or new property. And I can actually set a build method, and I can say if I leave it blank or I don't add this, then it's going to build using what AWS gives you with their runtime. But if you add a Makefile, then you have the ability to custom build your resource. And where this comes in really handy is because with serverless, with Lambda functions, we support multiple languages. We support Node, Java, Python, Ruby, Go, and .NET, and I'm probably missing some. But it may not be the language you want. You may want to use Swift. You may want to use PHP. You may want to use Rust, something like that. So you can actually custom build your runtime and use our custom runtime handler to run that. So a lot of flexibility when building these out. Now, we talked about the policies, and I want to tell you, best practice is to always start with our AWS managed policies, right? And there's a link here. That slip.link is a URL shortener of mine that you can look at. So if you go to slip.link/SAM policies, and I'll be sharing these slides, so don't worry about taking crazy notes. I'll be sharing these slides out. And it'll show you all the managed policies that we have, because one of the cool things about serverless is security starts from the beginning, and we encourage granular security built into the same templates. Let me show you how that works. This is what the actual policy looks like. Excuse me one moment. And how this works is it shows you the permissions to be applied. You'll see this on that web page that I just linked you to, and the resources they are applied to. And in your SAM template, you're able to use those in simply 3 lines of code. You can see here on line 11 where I say, hey, the policies I want to attach. I'm going to use the DynamoDB read policy. And it's pretty descriptive right in the name. This gives read-only access to the policy. And you can see that here where I show this is the CRUD policy I'm showing here. So it's create, read, update, and delete. So I could use that one as well. But the read one would just be the read, like get items, scan, query, things like that. Okay. And then I can pass it a table name. So in a sense, what I'm doing with these 3 lines of code is I'm saying you can read, and in this particular one, you can read from this table and only this table. Okay. And the table is saying only that function can read from me. So if I try to add something from this function, it won't work because this is an identity and access management policy that's being applied. So, and you can use these policies with functions and state machines. And we'll talk about state machines in just a minute. All right. Okay, great. Yeah, please drop your questions in the chat there. I'm just kind of watching to make sure we're not going too fast or my screen's too small or something weird. So, all right. So the second thing we have is an API. The API is critical to what we're doing. Now, you saw in the last example with the function that I implied that an API should be built by adding an API as an event. But I can also build an API separately. I can do it as kind of declaratively as its own resource and then kind of tie that to the functions. And the reason I would want to do that is as we get into longer and more complex APIs, you might want to define that through OpenAPI or Swagger. And so you're able to do that. And you can also add things with API Gateway like caching, throttling, resource policies, authentication. You can do a lot of stuff at API Gateway that you can kind of get out of your code, right? And so it can handle a lot of that. In fact, and I have an example where I built this URL shortener, that slip.link. That URL shortener is built entirely with just API Gateway and DynamoDB, and then CloudFront to run that. And it's all built in a SAM template. Glad to share that link in a little bit. The second thing we have is an HTTP API. And this is an API also. And the difference here is this is one we just released that does some of the same functionality. Eventually, it will do all the same functionality as the REST API, which is what an API is. And we're adding that, but it's brand new, and it's built to be 70% lower in cost and 60% faster. So we rebuilt this from the ground up using the lessons we learned. So you can build an HTTP API as well. That's a serverless resource. The next thing we have is a simple table. Raise your hand. I won't see you, but raise your hand anyway if you've ever used DynamoDB. Okay, DynamoDB is our NoSQL database, or it's a object key value store, and it's incredibly powerful. You can do global tables, and it runs little things like Black Friday on Amazon.com. We implement this or Cyber Monday. It handles massive amounts of data, right? And you know, we use it to support some of our stuff, a lot of our stuff, and companies are using it for huge ones, but you can also use it for very small applications as well. And so we have this serverless resource called the simple table. And what we do with that is we kind of imply a lot of settings for you. So these 2 lines of code will actually create a DynamoDB table. But you can this creates a DynamoDB table with a primary key of ID, dynamic capacity. Again, we imply some settings. However, you can expand that and add some of your own settings. If the settings you need are not here, you can, of course, use just the standard DynamoDB table resource as well. The next thing we have is a layer version. Okay. Now, this allows you the ability to create a layer for Lambdas. If you're new to serverless, a layer is the ability you can share code through a layer. And I'll show that in the CLI, hopefully, if we get to it when I'm doing a demo. But the idea is if I have 30 Lambdas and they're all sharing the same package and stuff like that, rather than packaging it with each one, I can create a layer. I can create a single package that each of the Lambdas can refer to. And this is how you would declare that. What language it's compatible with, you know, the layer. So you can also, with this, if you have a layer that's using some special build stuff, you want to compile it a certain way, you can use the build method, and you can use a Makefile here as well. All right, 2 more to go on this. We have an application. So we have a thing called the serverless application, or the serverless application repository. Hey, just so you know, it's very early here in Colorado, where I'm coming to you from, and so my brain won't start until maybe noon today at lunchtime. So if I say anything weird, let's blame that, okay? But I am doing my Diet Dr. Pepper and got caffeine going. So, all right. So what this allows you to do is if you find an application you want to use in the service application repository, you can actually pull that in as a sub application in your application. And the idea behind the service application repository is if I have some repeatable code, let's say I have a bucket, I have a little package of code that updates images. The hello world of serverless is to drop an image in a bucket and do some manipulation in it, right? With image magic or something like that. So if I have something that does that, rather than and for every application that I need to use that, rather than recreating that, I can actually just pull that back in through using an application here. And you can pull it from S3 bucket, you can pull it from the SAR, different things like that. And the newest one to our family is the state machine, also known as step functions. Okay. And this allows you to declare a state machine and link to you can define the state machine right in here, or you can connect to another file, statemachine.asl.json, as you can see on line 4. I'm so sorry, excuse me. Where you can actually define that.
Sorry, I can't call an
so now my watch is talking to me. So if we want to use step functions in here, then I can add that right in serverless, and now I have access to the other functions and things that are in this SAM table. So if you use step functions, you know that you'll have direct integration with services, or you can use a function or a Lambda function that's in that template, and I have direct access to it. So this was added literally like 3 weeks ago. All right. So here's a reminder. I've showed you a bunch of serverless specific things you can use in SAM. However, if there's not a serverless one, you can still use standard CloudFormation. You can literally use SAM for anything CloudFormation. So, for example, a bucket or an SNS topic, an SQS topic, a user pool. If you want to build out your authentication and authorization with Cognito, you can do that right in here. Okay. So there's 14 function event source types supported in SAM. And this is what I talked about earlier. So every time you want to generate or you want to invoke a Lambda function, you need to have an event. And that event can be an S3 event, a create, delete, or update to a file, an SNS, something posted to an SNS topic, Kinesis, and so on. I won't read all these to you, but just kind of get this idea that these are all supported as events directly on a Lambda function. Okay. However, there are other services that can still integrate with Lambda. Amazon Lex, CloudFront, simple email service, CloudFormation, all kinds of things that can actually call the Lambda API and trigger Lambda to do some work. Excuse me. So this is kind of an idea of what those events look like. I showed you these. This would be inside of a function resource. I showed you the API one, but here's what like an SQS would look like, or an IoT rule. So if you're running a bunch of IoT equipment and you need to trigger, you're using the MQTT, you can grab that information off of that using the SQL type language here. So this gives you an idea. I'm sorry, I'm really having to clear my throat here. So another concept I want to talk about in SAM that helps you as a developer when you're building these out is the idea of using SAM globals. Okay, so let's take a function, for example. All right, so we have this function called myCat function. All right, so with this myCat function, I'm doing some things. I'm declaring the handler, the runtime, where the code is. I have a description, memory size, so on and so forth. And I've got an event, and I'm actually using an S3 event. I'm also passing environment variables. Now, this is a best practice with SAM. Notice in my code, I don't want to hard code a table name. I don't want to say, hey, always hit my animals or that, because I may use this somewhere else. To make this reusable, instead, I'm going to pass an environment variable in. So, and below this, you can't see it, but I created a table called my animals. So I could say pass in a variable that gives the table name and ref my animals. And the ref is a call that says refer to and grab the name of that table. So that table name will be passed in as an environment variable. So if I recreate this later, I always get the right table name. I never have to change my code. So just a quick best practice. So I have another one. I want to do a my dog function. Okay, and I would handle these in the same Lambda, maybe not. I don't know, but it's referencing a different bucket, same table. And I've got a layer in there. Remember we talked about layer. That's got all my AWS SDK stuff in it. So there's a lot of repeated code here, right? Things that we're setting. It's the only difference is the bucket that we're hitting, and that's pretty much it. And the folder that the file's in. So instead of doing this, I can combine that information in the global section. I can say, look, every function in this template should have a runtime of node 12. It should have a handler of index.handler. It should have a timeout of 15 seconds, so on and so forth. So you can see how that works. And now my functions themselves, their code footprint has been reduced. And the idea behind serverless, one of the things that we strive for is less code, right? We want to get you to the code that matters, right? So SAM allows you to kind of reduce that. And you can use that, several things in the globals like API. Say, hey, here's the core settings for each API, so on and so forth. All righty. So like I said, globals helps make your SAM templates smaller. All right. So the last kind of structure here that I want to talk about real quick is our metadata, and this is on the root of the template as well. Remember earlier I was saying, hey, you can have little segments of applications. You can pull those applications into yours. You could literally build an application of sub-applications through the serverless application repository. Well, this is how you can actually create an application. So let's say I build this little functionality that I want to share with all my coworkers and such. Well, I throw in a metadata, and I add this in, and now you can see I can use the SAM publish, and it'll actually create this application in the serverless application repository. All right, so we're going to jump into the CLI now, and we're not going to do that through PowerPoint. We're going to actually get in this, but just to give you an idea, CLI tools for local development, debugging, testing, deploying, and monitoring of serverless applications. It supports API gateway proxy style and Lambda service API testing. Right now, just a caveat, right now, SAM CLI only supports REST API, and that's going to change here pretty soon. We don't support the HTTP API testing locally. You can get response object and function logs available on the local machine. Use an open source Docker Lambda. And then you can tail. So one of the things you can do is you can do a SAM logs, and we may or may not get to this today. We'll see. And I can actually say SAM logs, and then I can, if I have a production Lambda, anything published, I can say SAM logs and pass the name of that function I have to give it, make sure my credentials can get to it. And I can tail those logs. So I can say SAM logs minus T. And every time that Lambda does something, I get something in the console. So it's a great way for debugging something that maybe you have out and you go, hey, I just want to see what's happening. So some different things like that. All right. I want you to have this link, slip.link/SWS. This is, again, my handler. We referred to earlier, I have some shows on our YouTube channel. We have a serverless YouTube channel that you can find at slip.link/serverless that cover a lot of what I'm covering here more in depth. I do a half-hour show every Thursday. It's at 10 a.m. Pacific time here in America, but we record them, we push them to YouTube immediately, and we share the code base immediately. So, yeah, there's a link. Nice. And so if we can, you can share that out. You can watch those. If the time doesn't work for you, again, we put them on YouTube instantly. They're also on Twitch in a collection. So, all right. Like I said, I'm EDJ Geek. So we're going to drop out of PowerPoint here, and we're going to move into the CLI. But real quick, I saw a couple of questions. I know we were going to wait to the end, but I can answer this real quick. It said AWS SAM, Amplify, and CDK overlap. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. So let's talk Amplify and SAM for a moment. So Amplify really kind of talks about how you approach that. Look at that. My mic's right there. There's my mic. Okay. And how you approach developing, right? And so AWS Amplify is really great. Well, it's great general, but as a front-end developer, you can have Amplify kind of build your backend for you, right? And it's great with app sync, but you can also build API endpoints through API gateway, things like that. And this is where, so your front end and your back end are all one package, and it's great. However, a lot of teams will work separately. Hey, here's our front end. We build our client. There's multiple teams. We might have a mobile client. We have a web client. We have a TV client, however. And then we have another team that builds our back end. So you separate those out. And that's where SAM comes in great, because I can build these things with SAM, building the serverless entities, things like that. Now, the CDK is kind of a different animal in that it's a different way of approaching. While SAM is very declarative, the CDK is going to allow you to use code to build. I'm a SAM fan. I can do everything I need with SAM, and it's especially with serverless. It's very specific to serverless. However, maybe you need to get into some complexity, or you need to handle some things that are outside serverless, or you just like that programmatic approach. You can do CDK. It's a great tool. We have some that both the Amplify team and the CDK team and the SAM team are pumping out some great stuff. So it really comes down to preference, but that's kind of my take on it. So I hope that helped. All right. So here we are. Let's jump into some actual examples. Okay. So you see, I've got a simple terminal up here. And what we're going to do is we're going to create an application, and we're going to show kind of how to work with that. So in the application, one of the first SAM commands that I have available to me is SAM. Let's actually show you. I'm using, I think I have the latest, unless they updated in the last day or so. I'm using SAM version 0.53. And the first, and let me just show you some of the commands that you have available. And please let me know in the chat. I'm watching it. If this text is too small, I'm glad to blow it up if I need to. All right. So you can see here, I've got different things: init, validate, build, all kinds of things. So let's go ahead and do SAM init. So I'm going to say, let's bring this back up to the top. So I'm going to say SAM init. And this initializes or creates a new application. And there's a couple of options I can choose. We have some AWS Quick Start templates, and they're different for the different runtimes. But I'm going to use Node. I'm a Node developer. So that's what I'm going to use. If that doesn't work, I'm sorry. I can't even spell .NET or Java or any of those other ones. I can, and if you really need it, I can do a little .NET, but it's not my strength. But we support the different runtimes. Now I'm going to choose an AWS Quick Start template right now. I could use a custom template. This means something that I've created and I've stored either in GitHub or in a zip file or locally in my path, right? But I'm going to choose an AWS one for right now. So then it's going to ask me, all right, which runtime would you like to use? And you can see the different options we have here. And I'm going to say Node.js 12. And then it's going to ask me to name this. So I'm just going to call it SAM app. That's fine for now. Okay, now it's going to grab the templates and it says, all right, which one do you want to do? We've got some templates in here for step functions, quick start, things like that. I'm just going to do the hello world example for the moment. And now it's ready. So if you see here, it created a folder called SAM app. And I've got my, let's go into it. And if I do ls, or I can, and I'll show you real quick the structure of that right there. Okay, and it's very simple. You've got an events folder, which are some test events. You've got your hello world is your actual function. And in there, you've got some tests. So let's jump over to code. And I use Visual Studio Code. I also use Cloud9. Sometimes I go back and forth depending. But you can also, I mean, really the idea of your choice. All right, so we're going to actually open that folder that I just created. Okay, it's on my desktop, under my workspace. All right. And there we go. All right, please tell me if this is big enough text-wise. We're doing all right here. Yes, we can see it, and it would be nice if you can increase it. I can. Thank you for feeding back to me. That's great. All right, so let's blow that up a little bit. There we go. Oh, that might be a little big, but we'll see. Hopefully you can read that okay. All right. So I've created this folder, and let's see what it includes. Like I said, it's got your events, and it's got your hello world, okay? So let's bring up the terminal. Now, in this particular structure, this particular format is storing each function as it's kind of its own little separate thing inside of the folder. You can also, there's a lot of different ways of setting up a SAM template, okay? Well, what's important is in the SAM template itself, now here's a template that, just like I was saying. All right, comfortable now, excellent, okay. And you get this, and it's got comments to help you find things, right? So in this, under this function, I'm calling it hello world function, there's a line called code URI, okay? And the code URI says, hey, this is the root of the function that I'm going to be using. It also tells SAM to know where to kind of debug from, things like that. And it says this is where the package manager will be. And then the package manager is npm, so I got this package.json file. Okay, so let's go ahead and cd into that because that's where the package manager is. Okay. And I'm going to install my packages. Now, one thing I'm using here that's kind of fun, and while that's installing, I'll pop over and show you. If you say npm minus d ping, this will tell you, you got to spell right. I've always said I'd be a much better developer if I could spell. This will tell you the repository that I'm using. Oh, I must have turned it off right now. I have mine. It's not showing here, and I won't take time to fix it because it's out of scope. But I'm using the new code artifacts for my npm packaging, my PHP, or I'm sorry, my pip packaging. It's really cool, really handy. If you haven't checked that out, it's worth looking at. That was just released about a week and a half ago, and it's a way to really have more control over your package management. But I failed to show you the right one there, so we won't fix that here. All right, so everything's installed. There's no vulnerabilities. We're looking good. So let's see what we can do with this. Okay, so now that I've installed my dependencies, let's jump back out to my root folder because that's where my template is. And in here, we have this thing called a hello world function. Okay, so it's the only function in there. It is driven by an API. We show an API here. So there's some things we can do to locally test this. So one of the first things I'm going to do, we have this thing called SAM local, and I'm going to invoke this function. Now, SAM local invoke will invoke the function as if it's being invoked from the Lambda API service. Okay. Now, this was meant to be generated through an API gateway, but we don't need that right now. Just the local invoke. Because it's the only function, I don't need to put a name. If I did need it, if there was more than one function, I could just put the name here. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pass an event. And we've already been given some events to work with on this. And you can see here, this is a standard API gateway event. Okay, so let's go back to my, so I'm going to invoke that and I'm going to pass in, let me jump back here. I'm going to go event and I want event.json. You can tell I've been working on some other stuff here. Okay, I don't need any locals right now. So we'll just say, okay, so what it's going to do is, first of all, you have to have Docker installed for this. And if it doesn't have the right container, it will actually go out and grab it, which apparently it is. So we've seen an update there. So it'll do this periodically, maybe once a week or so. And of course, it's doing it when I'm live streaming, but that's okay. There, we got it. And there you go. It's given me my response. I got a status code of 200. I got and my body is message hello world. So let's look at that code real quick so you can see that. And it's kind of heavy with comments, but this is all it's doing. It's responding with 200, excuse me, and I get hello world. Okay, so that's a quick, easy way to debug, right? So, but let's say I'm working on an API endpoint and a local client. Okay, so what I need is a standing API. No problem. I can do SAM local start API, and then it's the same. I don't need to pass anything else. I'm not passing an event because it's not looking for an event yet. Okay, so we're gonna say. There you go. So running. So now it says, hey, running an HTTP colon. It gives you the path here. We'll copy that real quick. And it says it is running on any. Okay. I'm sorry. Here it is. It says it's got to get. It's so I have to go to hello and I can do get to do that. And it'll do a response. So I can actually go over. Let's create a new terminal here. And I can actually say curl. And so my terminal will come up. So I can curl that address. Now, I'm going to actually not do this here first. I'm going to do it there. So I got a missing authentication, no token. The reason I got that is it kind of said, hey, this path doesn't even exist. So yeah, that's not going to work. So let's try that again and add the hello. Now what it's going to do, much like before, is it's going to invoke the Lambda. Now all we got is a response here. But if we go to the other terminal, you can see same thing again. It actually, now this time it didn't download. It said, nope, you've already got it. So let's go ahead and mount it. It gives you all the debug information here. And there you go. Then it gives the response out here. And you can see that this is still running. It's still waiting for calls. So I can go in and I can say, hello, everyone. And I'm going to save this. Now, I'm not going to restart the server. I'm just going to leave it. Let's see what happens. Let's go back to my terminal. I'm going to run the same call again. And there you go. Hello, everyone. It got changed because it knows it's using the code base to use that, right? It knows that, hey, I don't need to change it. I'm just going to grab that file, and there you go. So that's how you can do local invocation and local testing. So I could actually point my local client at my HTTP 127.0.0.1 colon 3000, and I now have a client that I can test in. All right, so I'm going to check for questions real quick. Okay, how are we doing on time? We okay?
Yes, we are. No problem.
Oh, okay, how much more time do I have? Because I want to make sure and show what counts.
15 minutes.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then some, yeah, and if we have any Q&A, glad to help with that. All right, so let's show some fun stuff. Okay, so I'm going to actually open a new file. Okay, or I'm sorry, a package I've been working on, and I actually just released that this week. Okay. Now, this is my repository for sessions with Sam that I was talking about earlier. And one of the things is I was explaining in, excuse me, the presentation that you have more control than just what's provided in the runtimes. So like you saw in there, we have Java, we have Python, we have Ruby and Node and so on, but we don't support Swift. Okay. Now, if you're not familiar with Swift, Swift is a development language that's used for iOS, right? So it's Apple's well behind it. So let's say you wanted to run an API in Swift. Okay. Well, you can do that by using what's called our custom runtime. And our custom runtime has, and we're not going to go into how to build a specific custom runtime right now, but I am going to show you how to use it. Okay, and this is important if you want to get beyond, or if you want to do some custom stuff with even the existing templates that you have. All right, so this is a little more advanced than a 100, but I think it's important to know if you're looking at different languages. So I'm working in my custom runtime here, and I'm just going to show you this template. Okay, if I can get to it, there it is. All right, so in this template, this is a template I built here. Again, we're declaring, it says HTTP API. This is actually a Swift application. All right, so in this template, all I'm doing is first I'm declaring 2 Lambda functions. The first one is a Swift API example, and I'm actually triggering it via HTTP API. Okay. Now, notice, remember I said if you add a metadata, you can add a build method. And my build method, I'm going to use a Makefile instead of the standard runtime because I want to control exactly how it's going to build. And I'll explain why in just a minute. I also create a function called squared. Now, this doesn't have an event. You know, hey, hang on, Eric, you're breaking the rules. You said if you're going to, everything needs an event. Yes, I did. And this will get called via the Lambda API or locally. I'll emulate that. So this is and this would be something like, I remember I said that there's some services that integrate with Lambda that we don't have the support for the trigger inside. And so like I can put a Lambda out there, make it available, and then invoke it from, I can connect to it from like a CloudFormation service or one of those services that like to make use of Lambda functions. All right. So again, on this one, I also use a Makefile. Now let's show you kind of what a Makefile looks like. And don't worry about this if you don't know, if you haven't used Makefile. I just learned Makefile this week. So it's like, whoo, I've used it before, but I got much more into it. So on my Squared app, basically, and I'm not going to walk through and explain this, but I want to show you, I have 2 different builds. I have build and then the function name, which I'm dynamically loading. And this is what SAM is going to use to build the function. So SAM build will actually invoke and run, and I'm actually using a Docker to build it out. So I don't have to have Swift installed locally on my machine. This will work on Windows. It'll work on anywhere. I'm also, so the Docker, and then I'm copying it out. The ending result is, and I won't do all this, but you'll be able to see it, is SAM build creates an AWS SAM folder. And we're going to go back to SAM build on the other application in a minute. And in here, under this function, I have a bootstrap file. And that's what's needed to run API gate or to run a custom runtime. So, and I've got all my supporting files and things like that. But now, I have another example with Rust. Now, I can't code in Rust to save my life. I'm really not that good in Swift either. But this gives the idea that, hey, I can do other languages if I want, as long as I do. And we have documentation on what needs to be in the bootstrap file and what it needs to do. So, all right. So that's kind of an idea of how does SAM build work with the custom runtime. Let's look at a simpler one to kind of get an idea there. Hey, look at there. I shouldn't have closed that. All righty. Let's get back into this one. All right, let's go back to our SAM app that we were using earlier. And we're going to do a couple things, okay? So we've got this hello world function. Now, one of the questions I get asked a lot is, how about testing? I don't test my code because it's always accurate and perfect. That's not true. The most dangerous part of an application is anywhere I've coded in it. That's the most brittle part of an application. So we want tests, right? We want test coverage. So one of the cool things is you can test Lambda functions just like you do normal code, right? So let's look in our tests and see what's happening, okay? In our test here, we're using, we're Chai to do our testing. So that's our requirement, and you can see I have some expectations that I'm doing, and I'm checking different things. This is very simple. It should be an object. It should be equal to 200. Should be equal to a string, and then it says, "Hey, hello world." And remember, I changed it. So let's actually run the tests. So I can run the tests from from the inside the folder. So it's wherever the package file is. So I'm gonna say npm test. And I'm going to spell it properly. Okay, I hope y'all are watching. Okay, all right. Okay, so now when I run that, okay, let's see what happened here. Okay, so we expected hello world, but we got hello everyone. All right, so I can go back and fix my function, or because I updated this, I'm going to go ahead and fix my tests. So we expect it now to say hello everyone, and I can run npm test again, and now we're passing. Okay, and really, so any of the runtimes that you're doing, you can use the testing libraries, and you can run these as you need as well. I've seen folks set up like Wallaby or some type of automated testing where this is constantly happening, right? So just to kind of get that in your head, okay, yes, we can test local, and all of our template examples, at least in Node, they have tests attached to them where you can kind of show how to do some mocking and different things in that respect. All right, so let's look at debugging. Okay, so this is all well and great, but I want to be able to debug. I need to be able to do a I need to be able to stop my function and actually, capture it and look at what the function is and step through it. So what you're able to do is we can add a debug function. And actually, let's go over here real quick. I'm going to do something a little different now that I've got this. I have another package that I'm going to use, but I need to grab the repo real quick here. So remember earlier when I was saying, hey, you can use your own templates. Well, I have my own template set up. So let me show you how that works. So I'm going to go back to my terminal. I like to use the terminal when I'm doing this stuff. Okay. And I'm going to go back to the root of this, and I'm going to create a new one. So let's go SAM init. Okay. This time I'm going to choose a 2. Okay. And it's going to ask me, where is your path to your application? So I'm going to paste it here. Now, this can be a local path. It could be a zip. It could be an HTTP. You can see all the choices here. Mine happens to be in Git. Okay. So it's saying I've downloaded it. Yes, I want to delete it and re-download it because I've done some updates to it. So that's fine. All right. So now I've got one. And it created, as kind of my bad. I knew that too. It created right in the root. That's fine. Let's just do this. We're going to rm-rf our SAM app. That was silly of me. So that's one doesn't create the folder for you because you didn't name anything. It's going to hopefully based on a template. And the reason it does that, there's actually a method to that, is you can use Cookie Cutter as well. If you're not familiar with Cookie Cutter, it's a template management system. And you can actually, in the template, you can ask questions like, what should I name this app? Where should I store it? Mine doesn't do all that. I just like the template itself. So, all right. So there's my template. Let's go back to code deploy. Let's open the right one now. And we're going to go to desktop workspace. Okay, there we go. And here's our application. All right, so first thing we're going to do, now this one's set up a little differently, okay? Instead, in source, I have 3 different functions. This particular one is based on the web application template in AWS. So if you wanted to grab that, and this one actually does all the functions in the same folder, and it has the tests outside the folder and the same. And I've set it up so it'll all still work, and all my package and stuff is in the root. Now, why did I do that? I don't like to switch around folders. I'm lazy. That's just where it's at. I'm not proud of it. But I like this setup better. Okay. Again, I was saying with SAM, you can set them up how you want. You have a lot of choices. So, all right. So one of the things that I've done here is in my VS Code is I've added a configuration for debugging this application. We have this on our documentation under the serverless. If you just search serverless or SAM CLI debugging in Visual Studio Code, it'll show you how to put that in, and it looks much like this. So let's first of all npm I. So let's install our dependencies, and then once this is done, we'll get rid of this launch here. All right. So there's a lot of dependencies in this one. Now here's something kind of fun. So let's do this after it's done building out. So I'm actually doing some compilation here. So give us a second. Stalling. All right, there we go. Oh, looks like we got a vulnerability. I'll handle that for a little while. Looks like someone wants some funding as well. All right, so our npm packages. So you see the node modules. That's now there. Now watch this. npm test. Okay. So I'm going to run my tests. And look at here. I have a whole series of stuff I can run. Okay. And I've set this up where it runs several different tests. They all pass. And it shows my coverage. I don't have coverage everywhere. I have a response handler in a layer that it's not looking so hot right now. So I need to add some more coverage. But that gives me, again, we're back to running tests. But now I want to show how to do the local debugging. So I'm going to debug the get all items file. Okay. So all this does is this is actually talking to DynamoDB. Now I haven't deployed this. So my DynamoDB doesn't actually exist. There's a good chance this is going to blow up on us, but let's try it anyway. Maybe I can catch it before it blows up. So I'm going to add a breakpoint, okay? And then I'm going to show you deploy in just a minute. In fact, let's do that now so we can see this, okay? All right, so let's go SAM deploy. Now I've never deployed this, so I'm going to do. Hey, one thing I need to do. So here's a quick tip. If you're ever doing this, I run ZSH as my terminal, and I use the ZSH AWS plugin. Here's why. I have no profile right now. I've done consulting for a lot of different companies, and I have been known. This isn't being recorded, so I'll go ahead and say this. I have been known to. Yeah, oh, thank you. Good job on the link there. I have been known to push a Lambda to the wrong client. So. Let's edit that out. Okay. So anyway, so I don't add a profile until I need it. So I use the AWS plugin, and I say ASP my profile, and now that sets temporarily my profile settings that I need for my credentials for AWS. This is just kind of a gate that I put on myself because I'm not smart at all. So all right. So now let's go ahead and do SAM deploy. So we're going to SAM deploy. And the first time I do it, I'm going to say -G. And that means guided. Okay, or I could do -- guided. And this says, all right, let's collect some information. So first of all, let's name it. So we'll call this one, instead of SAM app, we'll SAM, and we'll initial Mebeded. No, I didn't even come close. Yeah. Hang on a sec. I tried earlier, and there it is. All right, so we'll just do that. Okay, so the next thing it's saying is, where do you want to deploy this? Now, because it's closest to me, and that's what's going to show up on the screen, I'm going to go to US West 2. Now it says, do you want to confirm changes before you deploy? Nah, I'm okay with that. But it'll show them to me, but I'm going to deploy. And it says, can SAM create the role it needs? If you say no here, the game's over. SAM needs to be able to create the roles to be able to do these. And it's going to be based on the credentials that you have in your profile. So be aware of that. Okay? Now, here's a warning it's going to say is, hey, these functions, they don't have any authorization tied to it. And that's on purpose, but SAM always likes me to make sure. So just in the guided deploy, meaning the first time, I have to say, yes, I know, and I'm okay with that. And the last thing it says is, hey, do you want me to save these configuration settings for you? And yes, I do. So now what it's going to do is it's going to deploy the application. Okay, so it's uploading. What it did is zipped everything up for me, and then it's going to upload for me. Now, that may be a little slower because I'm also streaming quite a bit here. There we go. Whew, that made me nervous. It seemed like it just wanted to stop there. All right, so while that's going, let's go back to our debugging. So we'll create a new terminal here so we can kind of see both. All right, so we'll just kind of keep an eye on this. And it's deploying. It's pretty slow because I'm streaming. So let's get to debugging. All right, so we're going to go ahead and add in. We're going to create. Let's just do a breakpoint here. Okay, I've got my launch code. So if I go into the debugging window, you can see, and my window is so small that it's kind of hard to see. I'll drop it down here. I have attached to SAM CLI. Okay, that's what that launch code was. Okay. Let's look at our deploy real quick, kind of see what's going on. Okay, it's giving me status of everything going on. Up here, it showed me everything it's going to do. It looks a little unpretty because I've got it all crammed down, so I apologize. All right. While that's deploying, so here, we're going to say SAM. Remember that invoke? So let's just invoke first to make sure everything's okay. So we're going to SAM, and it's not SAM invoke, it's SAM local invoke. And now, because I'm using, I have more than one, I need to know the function name. So my template's really, really simple. I have the get all items function. So we're going to go here. So I'm going to actually paste that here. And then I'm going to pass it. Oh, good Lord, Eric. Sorry, folks. Oh, no, that's actually what I want. Okay. Let's do that again. Okay. All right. So we're going to, so what it's asking me and it's griping about is it's saying, hey, what events do you want to do? I'm not going to worry about the locals. I'll explain that in a few minutes if we have time. So all I'm saying right now is SAM local invoke get all items function, and I'm passing an event just like we did before. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So it's going to invoke it. Okay. We're building the image. So what it's building right now is a layer that I have in there. I talked about layers before. It'll only do this on the first time, and it makes that code available. All right. So here's my response. I got the security token included. The request is invalid. Okay. So apparently I'm passing. Oh, ASP. I didn't have this one. So let's invoke it again. This should be good. Okay. Mounted. Now I'm going to admit, yeah, all right. So resource not found. That's okay. So what it was doing, it was looking for a table that doesn't exist. Okay. So it does. We just deployed it, so it does exist, and we'll fix that in a second. But let's in fact, let's actually show you that now so you can see how that works. Okay. So boy, I've got too many windows open, so I'm gonna kill this one and just use this one. So in and let me just do it real quick here so I can say and then I'll explain it so we can have it all done. Okay, and we'll go. So this utilities is not something that is available everywhere. This is just something I built, but I'm going to tell you what it does in just a minute so it makes sense. JSON. All right, so what this does, in order for us to know, see, we're passing in our template. Let's go back to our template so you can see it. I'm passing environment variables. I'm passing in a table name, right? And I'm grabbing it. When this table right here is created, I'm grabbing that name. So it passes that back. So my locally, I need to know that. So I need to create a file. It doesn't have to be called locals. It could be called anything. That's just what I use. That says, hey, for the different functions, here's the different information. Okay, and that's how we do that. So let's show this now with that. So we're going to go SAM local. I know we're running on time here, so I'm gonna. So now I'm gonna pass in that locals file. It's the flag in locals. So now let's invoke that and see what we see. There we go. So there's nothing in there yet, so it won't work, but there you go. You can see it happen. All right. So straight up, I'll tell you that those are a little slower. We're working on the speed of that. So let's get back to my original issue, or not issue, but thing is we're going to actually debug. So now I can pass the same thing, but I'm going to pass a debug flag. I'm going to say -D 5858. And I've got my flag in here. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this, and it's going to build it out again, and it's going to say, okay, I'm up, I'm waiting, and I'm waiting for the debugger to attach, and that's what it's doing here. So now I can go into debug, and I can run this, and we'll skip by the one. Hang on a second here. Let's run it one more time. This is going to fail on me right in front of everybody. All right, hang on a second. Okay. So I can't connect to that. So let me see what I've got. 5858. All right, something I've done here. Let's just launch that again. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and go again here. Let's open that file back up. We want that file. We've got there's our breakpoint. All right, let's see if I can make this work here. This would be very embarrassing if I can't. I may have changed something. So, all right, so it's waiting. There we go. Nope, it's skipping. Oh, hang on. I'm skipping over something. Let's try to add a couple of breakpoints. All right. Well, I'm gonna call foul on this one. Apparently, I've changed something, or something's wrong on my launch symbol. But that's the basic approach, and that link that we put in there is how you fix that. I'm a little curious of what's going on here. I'm going to try it one more time, but we're not going to spend too much time on this. All right, so SAM local invoke, get all, just making sure everything's how I want it. Event, get all items. Yeah, okay, everything. 58, yep, okay. All righty. Well, now that's running. And let's try this real quick here. So it's attaching, but I'm skipping my breakpoints. So I'm going to have to figure out. I just upgraded my codes. There may be something with that, but we're not going to chase that down. I know we're out of time. I'll get this working and send out a link on that. So sorry about that. Up to there, we did all right. Any questions I can answer real quick?
Yep, I see one question coming in from Gautam. He's asking, how can we run MJS file? Okay, so
Okay. Oops, sorry.
as Lambda only allow index handler, can we execute as index handler, index MJS instead of index.js?
All right. So what you would need to do. So I'm not familiar with MJS. I'm going to be real honest. So what is MJS?
Okay. So MJS is, I'm also, quite new to this because I usually work with Python, but MJS is an extension of ECMAScript modules. So
say again, of what?
ECMA, ECMA.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay, all right. Okay, so it's like a TypeScript. I'm assuming and it outputs JavaScript. Okay, so what you would want to do is there's a couple ways. You can use Webpack. You can use some of your standard processes. Like right now, I'm sure you do a compilation or a transpilation using Babel or something like that. And so what you're able to do is export to JS. You can do the same thing. You can add that to your tool chain in Lambda. Think of a Lambda function code as just regular code. Now, it has a specific structure, right? You have to have a handler, and the template is to point to the handler. But past that, as long as it's pointing to it, and you can even add, and this is where the build that we just talked about. Let's say you want to build it each time. You can say SAM build and use a Makefile, and in that Makefile, you can run your transpiler to change that all out and output it to JS. And that's exactly what I'm doing in the Swift, except for I'm doing a bootstrap file, which is required. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, and Eric, I believe, we can anyways have custom runtime using layers. So whatever additional power that we need, we can attach layers to the existing code, and we can attach as many sidecars as we need.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the Makefile allows all that, or you can do it in an automate. A lot of folks have automated into their Visual Code or whatever IDE they're using. So, but the bottom line is the same as if you were writing an Express app, right? Is when all is said and done, it generally goes to a JS file, and use the same functionality when you're going with in Lambda.
So Gautam has a follow-up question. He's asking, without Babel, can we use that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Like I said, I'm not exactly familiar on the transpilation for MJS, but whatever tool chain you need, as long as it's locally installed, you can absolutely talk to it in Visual Studio Code. Lambda doesn't change any of that. All Lambda requires is that at the end, it be a JS file if you're doing Node. So, yeah.
Correct. So, Eric, I have a question from my side.
Sure.
I've been using SAM for quite some time now. You've talked about SARs, Serverless Application Repository. Now, what is a real-life scenario when I'm doing a normal development? For example, I'm building up a product, or it could be multiple products that I am building within my company. And can SAR help me with those aspects? For example, I want to create a logging module. If I want to create structured way to get the DB calls in and out. What are the real use cases that you see where we can use SAR?
Yeah. So first of all, let me say this real quick. There's kind of three ways to share code or keep from building redundant code. Okay. One is SAR. Okay, and SAR is really designed for miniature kind of compiled applications, right? Not compiled, but grouped applications, right? So for instance, I have a logging module that should be the same anywhere. So that's a little sub application. I'm going to drop it in. But if that's really just kind of a library, right? So this is the library we use for logging, or here's my logging module. You could use a layer for that as well. Okay, either one of them version, and so you have control over that. So those are two options, and so I tend to go layers because I don't. Well, it kind of depends on what I'm doing, but layers handle most of what I'm doing. But if you're thinking in like enterprise-wide building blocks, and we talk about building blocks with serverless all the time. Hey, here's a module for logging that has some. When you log, it's going to pull in some different things. It has some Lambda functions to do some things. It's more than just a library. That's a SAR app right there. Right. And so I can when I import it, I can pass in some parameters to make it unique to that particular application. If I'm just, hey, here's the particular log file, then I'm gonna drop that in a Lambda, and I'm gonna add that layer conversion that. The other way of doing it, we just released is through EFS. You can actually now attach EFS to a Lambda function. And this becomes very handy if I have large and this isn't really functions, but libraries or data sets that aren't in Dynamo or that aren't in a database that I can that are available to me in my Lambda. So let's say I have a bunch of machine learning libraries or training, things like that. That's another way of attaching it. So now, while that's brand new, we're already seeing people use that. Now, the difference there is you have to be careful is that's real-time changes, right? So that's intended, obviously. So, hey, yes, that's what we want. But you have to be careful because if I make that change and my Lambda is referring to it, the next invoke of that Lambda is going to get changed, right? So don't break it. And so you have to. But the nice thing about that is I can connect EFS to my containers. I can connect it to my Lambda service. I can connect it to EC2. So I can share that data going around. So real world experiences, we're seeing folks use all of that. Like I said, with SAR, it's very module or service application repository. It's very module little applications. So if you think about, hey, here's why I have a bucket that does imaging. I don't want to rewrite that over and over. I'm just going to grab that app, pass those parameters. I can version that. So hopefully that answers your question. Real world examples, we see a lot of use of each of them.
So we've got a question coming in from Vivek.
Okay.
Can you use SAM to deploy entire Node Express application as single Lambda function? No, you should not do that. But yeah, I'll ask you to answer it as we do with Serverless Express NPM package. As I have so many existing apps to migrate as serverless.
So, into the question, you broke up a little bit there, but you're asking, can you launch Express apps through SAM?
No. So, I'll break up the question in two parts. One is, can we use SAM to deploy the entire, Express application as a single Lambda function?
Yep.
So that's one thing. And second, so he's referring to, can we club everything together in a single bundle and use it the way we use the Node server deployments?
Yeah, so you can. To answer the first one, yes, absolutely. That's however you want to structure your Lambdas. Now, I have a whole talk on what I call monolithic Lambdas, and I'm a fan of microservices. I'm very much a fan of decoupling because one functionality of that goes down and the whole thing's down. Whereas if I build microservices in Lambda, then I have a lot more resiliency. But that's time for another time. I could spend hours on that. The second one, and I'm sorry, I'm not sure I'm exactly understanding. The second one you're asking about, can I lump them all together in a SAM template, multiple functions, or?
Correct. So
yeah.
Actually, Eric, I believe if we merge everything together in a single Lambda function, we are going to end up reaching to the limits of the payload and everything that we have with Lambda. Because what he's referring to is basically whatever existing application that he has built,
yeah.
He wants to migrate everything in a single Lambda function.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a lift and shift. That's a serverless lift and shift right there. Yeah. So yeah, you could, especially with new EFS in place. Now it's not going to be as fast as the temp folder in the Lambda. It's pretty fast, so you want to check the latency. But you could conceivably, and here's how I would approach that. Okay. Look, Eric, we want to go serverless, but we don't have time to break this apart. Okay. So you can look at using a Lambda, using EFS to bring up more than the limitations that are in Lambda itself, and run this application. But I would be quickly looking to transform that. I would be looking to migrate that. And you can, just to give you an example, and this is a very real pattern, if you've ever heard of what's called the strangler pattern. Okay, so what you're talking about is, so we've got one Express app. It's humongous. It's monolithic. It's 732 gigahuva flops, whatever. I'm making up storage amounts right now, but you could say, okay, we're going to put that behind there. And we're going to, so because we can't be down. Obviously, downtime can happen, all right, or minimal downtime. So then what we're going to do is we're going to come in later is we're going to build an API gateway, because right now you're probably doing your routing at your Lambda, and you're just kind of proxying your API gateway in, right? So the next thing we're going to do is in our API gateway is we're going to take just a little part of that application and break it off into its own Lambda. And we're going to test it, and we're going to try it out. And once we like how it's working, at the API gateway level, we're going to change that route and say, instead of routing this particular path to our mono Lambda, we're going to point it to our singular Lambda. And then as those start breaking apart and you get 5, 6, 10, 20 Lambdas, however, then you can get rid of the mono one, and your API gateway is handling all that routing and authentication and everything. And now your application has found much more resiliency. If this Lambda goes down and I've decoupled it from the rest, so I'm using pub, sub, and queue patterns instead of direct invocation, then I've got a much more redundant, resilient site. And to answer the original question, can I manage all that in a SAM template? Absolutely.
Correct. Okay, folks, do we have any more questions for Eric? So Eric, you're kind of end of line here. Let's see if folks have any more questions. If
all righty,
wrap it up.
Yeah, and if you want to do your question directly to me, hit me on Twitter. I try to answer. I'm going to promise you that it's not immediately, but I try to answer every question. So.
Okay, so
we got a question. Yep.
From Kaivalya.
All right. Wait on that. Just while we're waiting, I'll tell you, this is what it looks like around my house right now. We're in harvest. This is not my house. Okay. I do not want to, but we're in harvest. We have lots of, when you walk out, I live in a very kind of a rural area of Colorado. So there you go, Colorado. And today it's sunny, but it has been raining. So come visit Colorado.
So are there any plans to integrate SAM templates with CloudFormation?
So it already is integrated with CloudFormation. Yeah, SAM is literally an abstract of CloudFormation. So when you run this, the only difference between a CloudFormation template and a SAM template is that little transform tag that's right at the top. And, oh, thank you. It's a nice farm. And so it's that little transform flag right at the top that says, hey, before you go to CloudFormation, call this transform. And here's what actually happens is it takes those serverless resources that I went through, those 7 resources, and it converts them to CloudFormation resources, okay, based on how you set it up. And then it just runs normal CloudFormation.
And I've been using SAM templates along with CloudFormation endpoints as well. So that's something that I'm tweaking with my setup. So I can basically merge both the things together and run it. That's what we've been doing, because a lot of times, a lot of features are not there, which you need in CloudFormation. You can use as and when it's required. So yeah, that's where, we've been seeing, both the things merging up.
Yeah, let me go back on that real quick. So if I build a SAM template, and one of the examples, like S3 is not a specific serverless resource, right? But I can throw it, and if you remember in my demo I showed, I can throw that right in there with it. So here's the nice thing is, when in a CI/CD pipeline, so what you saw was me deploy through through SAM, which is really handy when you're a developer. But that's not how you want to deploy production, right? So when we deploy production, we have a CI/CD pipeline that runs my tests, gets my approvals, and then it creates an artifact. And you could do what's called SAM package. And I didn't show it today because it's really just for CI/CD. SAM package prepares your code into an S3 bucket and outputs a SAM template. And then you could straight up, just like you said, you could straight up go, and it calls a CloudFormation change set. And then if all passes, a CloudFormation deploy. So it actually uses CloudFormation, just like Ankit said. So.
And other way around. So for an example, one of the use cases that I've seen is a lot of times when I do deploy using CI/CD, I need to overwrite the existing parameters. So SAM doesn't support all the parameters, but if you use CloudFormation deploy with -- parameter overrides, it's gonna take all the parameters required, to override the globals that we are defining.
That's right. That's right.
And I would agree that's one of the limitations that I have requested to
yes.
SAM.
Yes. Yeah, and that's something we're working on. So yeah, you're going to see some great things coming out of SAM over the next year or so.
No problem. So I think it's time for us to wrap up the session, Eric. I'm glad we had this session, and
oh yeah, me too.
Thank you to Ahmedabad in December. I hope COVID gets settled down by then.
Yep.
And I hope that we do the event that we were planning in June, but now in December. It's gonna be good weather, when you come in December here. So looking forward to it. So
if AWS allows it, I am on a plane immediately. Well, of course, it'll be health reasons, but yeah, I am dying to come meet you in person, to meet the folks in person, to just be in India. I would love dying to. So yeah, it'd be great.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Tune in. Okay.
Yeah. All righty.
Thanks a lot, Sohesh. Okay. Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you, everyone.